I want to start with something simple, because sometimes the simplest framing is the most honest one. There's a quarterback in Cleveland right now who is making it extremely difficult for anyone inside that building to pretend the conversation is still open. And I don't mean that in the way people usually say it when they're pushing a narrative or cheerleading for a favorite. I mean it in the specific, observable, evidence-based way. The kind where the numbers and the film and the reports coming out of that facility are all pointing in the same direction at the same time, and the picture they're drawing together is getting harder to dispute with every single day that passes. Day 3 of rookie minicamp. Shedeur Sanders. 80% completions in 11-on-11 work. Let me tell you why that number should be stopping people in their tracks. Most rookies arrive at minicamp in survival mode. That's not an insult. It's just reality. The jump from college football to the professional level is jarring in ways that even the most prepared players don't fully anticipate until they're standing in the middle of it. The speed of the game, the sophistication of defensive schemes, the precision required in route timing, the sheer volume of information a quarterback has to process between the snap and the throw, it overwhelms people. It's supposed to overwhelm people. The whole point of early evaluation periods is partly to watch how young players handle the experience of being overwhelmed and start finding their way through it. That's the baseline expectation. That's what a coaching staff is usually bracing for. Shedeur Sanders did not look overwhelmed, not for a snap, not for a single rep. He walked onto that field on day 1 of rookie minicamp and performed like a man who had been preparing for this specific exam for months and arrived knowing every answer before the questions were asked. Todd Monken gave him 11-on-11 reps immediately, and I want to pause on that decision for a moment because it deserves more examination than it's getting. You don't throw a first-year quarterback into full group work on the opening day of professional evaluation because you're being generous, or because you have a loose experimental approach to practice design. You do it because you want to see something specific. You have a hypothesis about what this player is capable of under competitive pressure, and you want to test it against real resistance in a real environment before you spend any more time watching controlled individual drills that don't tell you nearly as much. Monkin wanted to see Shedeur Sanders play football, real football, and what he saw was a completion rate that most veteran quarterbacks would be satisfied with in a structured practice setting. Now, let me talk about what those completions actually looked like, because raw percentages don't tell the whole story, and I think the story underneath the number is the more compelling one. There was one specific rep that stuck with me when I went back through the details of what people were watching on that field. Shedeur tilting right before the snap, his eyes already working across the defensive alignment before the ball even reached his hands. He processed to his left, recognized where the window was opening, and fired without any hesitation whatsoever. No second guessing the read, no delay in the release. The ball came out with velocity and precision, on time and on target, and his receiver didn't have to break stride or contort his body to make the catch. That last part matters more than people realize. When a quarterback delivers the ball with that kind of placement accuracy, he's making his receiver's job easier. He's putting the ball in a spot where the receiver can catch it running full speed and immediately become a threat after the catch rather than stopping to adjust. That's not just a completion. That's a quarterback who has internalized an offensive concept so thoroughly that he's executing it at the speed of instinct rather than the speed of thought. The deep ball changed the conversation about his arm, and I say that as someone who has been paying close attention to how that conversation has unfolded. There's a segment of the analytical community, people who pride themselves on being rigorous and skeptical and data-driven, who spent a meaningful amount of time questioning whether Shedeur Sanders had the arm to threaten defenses vertically at the professional level. I understand where that conversation came from. It's a legitimate evaluation question. But what he showed in that deep ball drill was not a quarterback managing a limitation. It wasn't a player compensating with touch and trajectory because he couldn't generate the velocity to stretch the field. It was a genuine deep throw. Full mechanics, full extension, the ball placed downfield with the distance and accuracy to put it directly into a receiver's hands in a way that a corner covering from trail position cannot make a play on. The touch was right. The trajectory was right. The timing was right. When you put all three of those elements together on a downfield throw, you're not just completing a deep ball. You're demonstrating the ability to weaponize the vertical game in a way that changes how a defense has to defend you. That's a different category of threat, and Cleveland has not had a quarterback capable of creating that threat consistently in a very long time. And then there was the touchdown on the left side. I keep coming back to this play because it crystallizes something important about what kind of player Shedeur Sanders actually is at this stage of his development. He leaned into the pocket, his body weight forward in a way that tells you he's committed to the throw and not looking for an escape, and he surveyed the entire left side of the field. Not a quick glance, a genuine scan. He identified his receiver coming open against the coverage, trusted what he saw, and put the ball exactly where it needed to be. In stride, clean, precise. The kind of delivery that makes a catch look effortless because the quarterback did all the hard work before the ball left his hand. When I watch that play, the word that comes to mind is conviction. Not the manufactured bravado kind of conviction that some young players perform because they think it's what the moment requires. The real kind. The kind that comes from having done the preparation work so thoroughly that you trust your own processing in the moment even when the margin for error is small. Here is where I need to talk about Concepcion and Denzel Boston, because the chemistry dimension of this minicamp is something I think is being significantly undervalued in the broader coverage. People tend to treat quarterback-receiver chemistry as something fuzzy and intangible, a feel-good narrative element rather than a concrete football reality. I want to push back on that framing because chemistry between a quarterback and his pass catchers is one of the most operationally critical elements of offensive construction, and it takes genuine time and repetitions to build. When you can observe it developing in real time, when you can watch a quarterback anticipating his receiver's cuts, throwing to spots rather than bodies, trusting his read enough to commit to the throw before the separation is fully completed, that's not a soft observation. That's a measurable signal about where the passing game is heading. What people were watching on that field was Shedeur Sanders reading Concepcion's releases, anticipating Boston's route adjustments, delivering balls to locations rather than destinations. That's the specific kind of trust that a quarterback only develops when he's internalized the route concepts well enough to project where his receiver is going to be rather than waiting to see where he ends up. You can't fake that in competitive reps. Either the quarterback has done the cognitive work or he hasn't, and the ball placement is the tell. Concepcion's profile as a receiver, the quickness, the movement versatility, the ability to create separation on short and intermediate routes through footwork and body positioning rather than pure speed, is a specific kind of match for what Shedeur does at his best. A quarterback who processes quickly and delivers accurately to tight windows needs receivers who can consistently get open in those tight windows, and Concepcion's technical proficiency as a route runner is exactly that. Boston adds a different dimension. The size, the physicality, the ability to win contested catches in the red zone and on boundary routes where the quarterback has to trust his receiver to come down with the football against a defender who has a legitimate chance to make a play. That combination of profiles, a precision route runner and a contested catch specialist, is the infrastructure that a quarterback like Shedeur needs around him to express his full range of capabilities. Todd Monken didn't assemble that infrastructure by accident. He built it with a specific offensive vision in mind, and Shedeur Sanders is the quarterback that vision was designed around. Which brings me to the part of this story that I think is genuinely the most significant and the least discussed: the Monkin factor. Because the coaching change in Cleveland isn't simply a backdrop to the Shedeur Sanders story, it's the mechanism that makes everything else possible. Monkin arrived in that building without any organizational debt to the decisions made before he walked in the door. He does not owe the Deshaun Watson contract a starting job. He does not owe the narrative around previous evaluations any continuation or deference. His singular obligation to the Cleveland Browns organization is to identify the best available quarterback through honest, rigorous, tool-supported evaluation and then construct the most competitive offense he can build around that player. That's it. That's the whole job description, and the way he has approached it tells you something important about how he sees this situation. The helmet cameras are the detail I keep returning to. Monkin installed cameras on his quarterbacks to study their visual processing, the eye movement, the coverage reads, the decision sequence that happens in the half second between reading the defense and pulling the trigger on a throw. That is not a casual analytical tool. That is the kind of investment a coach makes in a player he is committed to developing into the best possible version of himself. You don't build custom observation infrastructure around a player you're genuinely uncertain about. You build it around the player you believe in enough to want to understand at a granular, technical level, the player whose development you're taking personal, professional ownership of. When I hear that Monkin is studying Shedeur's eye movement on film after practice, I don't see a coach managing an open competition. I see a coach optimizing a quarterback he has already decided is the foundation of this offense. Now I want to address the Deshaun Watson reality directly because it would be a disservice to the full story to dance around it. Watson is not at that facility. He is not on that practice field. He is not building timing with Concepcion in Boston. He is not getting repetitions in the helmet camera system. He is not accumulating the developmental currency that actually matters inside a new offensive system under a new coaching staff. The repetitions, the adjustments, the relationship building, the conceptual synchronization between a quarterback and his coordinator that only happens through sustained daily work. Every rep Shedeur takes with this offense is a rep Watson is not taking. Every timing sequence refined, every route combination synced, every connection strengthened between this quarterback and these receivers, all of it is accumulating on Shedeur's side of the ledger, and absolutely nothing is accumulating on Watson's. Watson has a contract and a history, but history doesn't win quarterback competitions inside new offensive systems, and contracts don't build timing routes. Presence builds timing routes. Work builds timing routes. And right now, only one of these two quarterbacks is present and doing the work. The gap between them in terms of what they're each building inside this system isn't just real, it's widening every single day, and it's being established in the most direct way imaginable, not through narrative or politics or organizational loyalty, through football, through practice reps, through the daily accumulation of a quarterback getting more familiar with his receivers, more comfortable in the system, more synchronized with his coordinator's vision, more confident in his own processing within the context of this specific offense. That process is happening in real time, and Watson is not participating in it. After practice ended, Shedeur stood in front of the media, and what he said mattered, though maybe not in the way that highlights typically capture. He talked about Monkin with a kind of genuine, unguarded enthusiasm that you simply cannot perform convincingly under camera pressure if the underlying feeling isn't actually there. He described the coaching staff's detail and intensity and individual investment as things he feels every single day, in meetings, on the field, in the weight room. When a young quarterback talks about his head coach with that specific quality of authentic excitement, it's not a press conference answer. It's a player describing an environment that is giving him what he needs to grow and recognizing that clearly enough to articulate it with conviction. And then he said something that I think revealed more about where his head is than anything else from that press conference. He addressed the people who have spent months constructing reasons for him to fail. The portion of the football conversation that has been more invested in being right about his supposed limitations than in watching what he's actually capable of when given a legitimate environment to perform in. His message was plain. If you genuinely want the Cleveland Browns to win, you get behind your players. You push forward with them. You don't spend your energy building arguments for why they should struggle. What strikes me about that response is the emotional architecture underneath it. Most young players in his position either perform visible frustration, which is understandable but counterproductive, or perform studied indifference, pretending the noise doesn't exist when everyone knows it does. Shedeur did neither. He addressed it directly, made his point with precise clarity, and immediately turned back to football. That sequence tells me something specific about how he's built psychologically. He doesn't need the negative conversation to stop in order to operate effectively within it. He's not asking for the doubters to disappear so he can perform. He's making the case for why collective belief in the right direction serves the team better, and then returning to the work that makes that argument for him more convincingly than any words could. That's not something you can teach. That's not a coaching point or a mental skills workshop outcome. That's the natural emotional intelligence of a player who has processed the external environment around him without letting it interfere with his internal competitive state. A player who can hold the noise in one hand and the football in the other and know clearly which one determines what actually happens next. I want to step back and look at all of this together because I think the full picture is more meaningful than the sum of its parts. 80% completions in competitive group work. A deep ball that ended a conversation that should have ended sooner. Chemistry with two new receivers that looked immediate and real and technically grounded rather than just aesthetically pleasing. A head coach who is investing the kind of analytical infrastructure into his development that signals genuine organizational commitment rather than competitive management. A media performance that demonstrated emotional maturity and leadership clarity on his third day as a professional football player. And a counterpart who is not present, not accumulating, not building anything inside this system at this moment. Put all of that together and the picture it draws is specific. It's not a quarterback fighting to earn a roster spot. It's a quarterback building an offense around himself with the full investment of a coaching staff that has already decided he's the one they're building toward. The Cleveland Browns may not have officially announced anything, but what's happening on that practice field every day is its own kind of announcement, quieter, more durable, and more persuasive than anything a press conference could deliver. The work is the statement, and the statement right now belongs entirely to Shedeur Sanders.